Welcome everybody. I'm chatting today to Alison Smith from wodenegg.com, and we are going to be talking about the winter solstice and kind of the celebrations that we have at this time of year and how they link back to ancient times. What links we've got to what people have been doing for thousands of years. Hi Alison. We are talking specifically about winter solstice, today. Do you want to give us a bit of background as to what it is? What's the celebration about?
Certainly. Well, winter solstice obviously is the shortest day of the year, and it's the day that it's a turning point of the year because it's the shortest day of the year, and it marks the end of the dark half of the year and the beginning of the light half of the year, because it's when the sun is going to start to lengthen the amount of light, the amount of warmth that we get every day. So it's a real turning point. The word solstice actually means sol for sun and stus for still, because it appears that the sun is still in the sky, that it's not moving, that it's stopped.
Wow.
And it's that moment of asking the sun to return, which is so crucial to the celebrations that we find throughout this period of time. And we also, at the same time, the sun is moving into the zodiac sign of Capricorn as well. So we have that intense moment of a new zodiac sign and the solstice, the standstill of the sun, as it then turns to start to lengthen. Make sense?
Yeah, just while you're talking there, I'm thinking, gosh, they must have taken a lot more notice of, well, the sky in this instance. I imagine nature all around, because how many of us would have noticed or thought the sun's stopped today? Just know what I mean? They must have been so much more in tune with what's going around on the planet and beyond.
Well, absolutely, because it was the amount of light that was available, the amount of warmth that was available was crucial to life itself. It was crucial to crops, it was crucial to being able to travel, it was crucial to knowing if you'd got enough food to last you through the really darkest days of the winter. So that very aspect of the sun beginning to lengthen and giving light and warmth was absolutely crucial to everything that we know of life. And obviously, before refrigerators, before ovens, before travel by electric lights and travel by cars, it was only by the light of the sun and the light of the moon and that side of things that we could actually travel around the country. So it's quite crucial to whether we would actually survive through the winter season to see that sun coming back.
They would have been far more in tune than, I mean, now if anyone wants to look at when winter solstice is, they'll Google it or look in their diary, won't they? Whereas obviously they didn't have that, so would they have anticipated exactly when it was going to be?
Absolutely, most definitely. Yes, they would have done, because of the fact of just how crucial it was. And also, if you think about the dark days of November and just how dreary that could be and how cold, and then you'd get into December and it could be bitter and it could be snow, and you'd be relying on whatever preserved meat and vegetable intrinsic to you. The human spirit wants to survive. We actually want hope, and we want to see that there are better times ahead. That's so within the human spirit. And so to want to have that idea that actually once we get to there, the days will start to lengthen.
I think
so it's quite an exciting, don't they? It's an exciting time.
It's amazing. And what kind of with this, so what kind of things did they do as a celebration, and was it just a celebration, or was it symbolic of them thinking that they had to do something for the sun to come back?
Right, that's a really, really good and interesting question. There's a huge amount of symbolism around this time of year, and a lot of it is to do with welcoming back the light, welcoming back the sun. We light candles, we light the Yule log, we have fire. Nowadays we have fairy lights on our trees.
My favourite.
And it's all to do with the light.
Yeah.
And so anything that could be symbolic of the light or of warmth would have been used. It's almost like a case of, you know, let's do as much as we can to encourage the sun to come back, but also let's do as much as we can to recognise inside of us that we know it is going to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And in ancient Roman times, they celebrated the feast of Saturnalia, and that actually began on winter solstice and went right the way through to January. And the idea, I mean, I love the idea they were feasting all that time. I don't know whether they truly were, but the idea was that actually from winter solstice to the beginning of January, you really would then see the difference. Because you can really, when you get into January, you can start to see that the days are lengthening. Mm. And so that's what they did.
Wow. So there's still people who celebrate winter solstice now.
Absolutely.
And do their celebrations differ from the celebrations that would have happened, 1,000, 2,000 years ago, or have they sort of adapted to the times? Are they similar? How does it compare?
Well, there's very similar aspects, because there will always be fire involved, and candles and the flame, and so that side of things, that's really been, well, forever really. That use of the symbolism of the light. You'll often find at times of the turning points of the years, there's a lot of drumming involved, a lot of noise, a lot of dancing. And that also is to do with the life energy and just wanting to see that life returning, if you like, and a celebration of life itself as well. A lot of the foods that are eaten as well are very symbolic and also come from way back. For instance, the ancient Romans were quite responsible for the early transportation of ginger. And I think you've spoken about ginger before. And ginger is so symbolic. It's such a symbolic spice, because by creating gingerbread houses, we're actually saying the next year is going to be warm for hearth and home. So it's all very symbolic, and there's an awful lot in our previous history which we've brought forwards. And another thing with the ancient Romans, they, as far as I can find out, they were the first ones really to have put oranges and put cloves in them, and they became pomanders. And of course, it's this whole thing of the richness of the orange and the cloves and the scent. Everything is about encouraging abundance for the next year as well. By having a feast around this time, it's encouraging, it's saying our tables are going to be full for the next year. Right. We're going to be abundant for the next year. Because in the darkest of winter, there truly wasn't an awful lot around. And so that's where that's come from.
Very positive outlook, wasn't it?
Yeah. Very much so. Yeah. And it's mindset. I mean, we're talking mindset work. We're talking, if we do this, it's saying we're going to be abundant. And the same with the use of evergreens, which I think you've also talked about as well. Yeah. The fact that, by having evergreens, it's saying things are still green.
Mm.
It can only get more green as the sun provides its warmth.
Wonderful. So there's a lot really that we're doing now, either that we see as traditions or just, oh, I don't know, or just seem to have become habit perhaps, that are that hark back right back to these times then.
There certainly are. There's so many traditions that we just do now, and they've got their roots way back in our past. And I think that's why it feels so, I wouldn't say exactly comfortable, that's not quite the right word, but it feels part of our own innate traditions.
Mm.
To be lighting a candle, to be lighting a Yule log, or to have a feast, to get family together. Don't forget as well, in the really deepest, darkest depths of winter, when there wasn't an awful lot of fuel available, it made sense to get as many people under one roof as possible, probably the animals as well, so that they only had to heat a small area. And so at this time, we're also used to being together.
Yeah.
And being with family, and people would travel to be there so that they could all be together and share what they had. A lot of the traditions actually do make sense, and they're rooted in survival. That's where they're rooted, which is where we started with this conversation, really. They're rooted in us surviving and knowing that we will survive, and in the hope and in the abundance that's to come.
That's really fascinating, that these things that we find comforting now are possibly linked back then really to these inner survival instincts that we have, that we've kind of, I mean, there's no doubt we've lost connection with, I think the ordinary person would say they'd lost connection with the outside world, especially in the winter. We're in our nice brick houses, with the heating on, with artificial light, you know, it's dark outside and we're talking in the light now, and yet we've still got these instincts that mean we want to be with people, we want to be cozy. Everyone, people who are winter people generally go to the I like to be cozy, don't they, just to sort of justify the you know that's why they like it, sort of thing. And so it all harks back to...
Absolutely, and it's all linked to the rhythm of the year and the wheel of the year. And really, by celebrating it and by having the abundance and saying, right, we're going to be doing this next year, you know, it's a great time, winter solstice and Yule, and right the way through Christmas. There are a lot of different religious festivals all over the world at this time, and most of them involve the light. And over this time period, it's such a wonderful time to set your intentions and to really start to think about what you want for the next year. I know we laugh about New Year's resolutions, you know, about how we make a resolution on January the 1st, and by January the 2nd we've broken it. But it's actually a great time to be thinking about what we want for next year. And indeed, what they would have been doing many, many years ago is actually beginning to think about planting the crops, beginning to think about where they were going to do what, and whether they would, you know, start to move back to where they wanted to live, sort of January, February time. So it's within us to really start thinking about that.
This is fascinating. I love this, because I've always poo-pooed New Year's resolutions as well. I've always like, well, what's the difference between one day and the day before? You know, if I wanted to do it, I should just do it now, which I suppose is true as well. But I really like that idea that, actually, this time of year, with it being a turning point, is a great time to be thinking about sort of setting a positive, like you say, intentions, sort of what you want to get out of the next year. It's absolutely on the right track, sort of thing.
Well, we're now going into, as I said, the light half of the year. So we're going into the time of the year where the days are lengthening, where the sun's growing in energy, where things will grow as we plant them. And so it's a good idea between now and spring equinox to start to think about what you actually want to plant. Right, if you think about this year as being the light half of the year, it's all about growth. And so we can set those intentions, we can have a think, and we can decide what we want to blossom and bloom as we get towards spring equinox. And so this is the light half of the year. So this is the period of time for growth, for expansion, to really start to think about what we really want, where we want to travel to. And it can be not just a journey as in on roads, but it can be a journey from within too. So it's a great time to be setting some thoughts in place. And whilst we do have a laugh about the whole New Year's resolution thing, to be actually just starting to plan and starting to think what we'd like to do with this half of the year is quite a powerful thing to do.
Yes, you've inspired me to actually do some this year then. put some thought into that. And another, so obviously winter solstice, Christmas, and you say celebrations around the world happen at this time and linked to the light, which after you've explained all that you have already really does make sense. So would the celebrations, obviously winter solstice is a day that we pinpoint. In fact, I think you've told me before that there's a time, we pinpoint it to a time. But would the celebrations have lasted longer? Would they have been more than a day? How would they have run?
Yes, they would. I mean, the whole Yuletide festival, I mean, some people say that Yule is actually on the day of the winter solstice, the 21st or 22nd. But the Yuletide is a festival, and you can take it to the 12 days from winter solstice through to January. The whole 12 days of Christmas is kind of very much rooted in Yule. And then we get the 12 days of Christmas, the Christmas Carol, which you can then take it from Christmas Day through to the beginning of January. The whole period of time, I suppose what I'm trying to say here is it was a whole time when people got together. And yes, there would have been proper celebrations on the day of the winter solstice to encourage the sun to return and to celebrate that the days were starting to get longer. But this time was such a crucial time for people to get together and to save on, well, they're saving on energy, aren't they? By all getting together and cooking together and keeping warm together. So I see it as a seasonal thing. It's you can focus it on one day, whichever day you want to focus it on, but the season is what's really important here, because there would have been a recognition that this is the darkest time of the year, but that the light was returning, and you would have they would have been watching it in ancient times. You know, they would have been saying, oh my goodness, you know, we've got a little bit more light today. because they needed to, they wanted to.
Without our watches now, would we notice? I don't think we would know. Well, I don't think I'd notice. So that's amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing, but perhaps without our watches, we really actually would notice it, because we'd be aware of needing to know time. And so perhaps we'd notice it more if we actually didn't have our watches and clocks.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll try it in the summer though. I'm not I'm not really a winter person. I like my long days. I like the light days. And lots of people do look up when winter solstice is for that reason, don't they? They do genuinely feel that hope of the days are going to get longer now, and we're going to see more light, and I'm not going to have to get up in the dark for work for too much longer. And they start to look forward.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll start looking in seed catalogues at this time. And whilst way back in our history, we would have been thinking about our crops, we would have been thinking about where we're going to travel to, you know, we would have be thinking about, you know, oh, you know, spring's coming soon, May's coming soon, we'll be able to be out dancing or meeting people. It's the wheel of the year. It's constantly turning. And by being in tune with that, so you can get used to those rhythms.
Can we talk about the landscape in the solstice celebrations? Obviously you've got winter and summer solstice. Places like, obviously everyone would have heard of Stonehenge, which I know I haven't noticed actually. I was going to look up before we spoke. In the summer there's a big celebration there, and people
sunrise,
which is lovely because well, this year it was ever so warm and beautiful, wasn't it? But the henge itself is also aligned to the winter solstice, I think, as far as I understand. So, I mean, would they would go out into the landscape, would they, to do these celebrations, or to?
Well, as far as we know, I mean, there's a lot unknown about stone circles. Certainly, we know that an awful lot of them are aligned for summer solstice and or winter solstice. Stonehenge has sunrise for summer solstice, and we think sunset for winter solstice.
Right.
Since the stone circles were built, obviously the earth has slightly changed, shall we say? But as far as we're aware, they were useful for perhaps telling the time. I mean, maybe at the very least we can say they were useful for telling the time. Yeah. They were useful for actually saying, yes, it truly is winter solstice, or yes, it truly is summer solstice. Whether people celebrated there, whether they went there to check in, whatever they did there, really we're unsure of. But certainly they were used for something, and they are aligned to the solstices.
I find them fascinating because they're actually quite common, aren't they? I was in holiday in Somerset this year, and was just looking at the OS map to sort of see where we might go for a walk, and noticed stone circles, stone lines. You could go and they're still there, just in a farmer's field.
I find it absolutely wonderful. I spent some time on Callanish, and in the Hebrides, there's wonderful stone circles there. But when you travel around, that they are actually all over the place, and you know, you think, well, wonder if there were even more in ancient times that have been lost along the way. And if that's so, then the calendar aspect of them makes so much sense.
They were sort of their calendar telling timepieces. Yeah, I mean, if you've been to the Hebrides, and I was in Somerset, that's a long distance as well. These were these were things that people were using over the whole country.
And over Ireland and Europe, yeah, absolutely. So there was purpose to them, and one of the purposes we can really logically say would have been for calendar purposes.
People love to think of like more weird and wonderful reasons for them as well, don't they? But I think that sounds more practical to me, but that's the way I am.
Well, I like the romantic side of it, that they would have been used for celebrations. But the one thing we truly know is probably 99% sure is the calendar side.
Right. I mean,
until we can travel back in time, we won't know anything else for sure.
No, it's going to be one in a world where we think we kind of know everything. It's one of those things that we have to accept. We haven't fathomed them yet. We haven't fathomed it yet. Yeah.
We can't even fathom really how they were built, because they're phenomenal structures, especially Stonehenge, huge. And so the very building of them, in the same way as trying to understand how the pyramids in Egypt were built to be so perfect and so big, you know, the geometry of that side of things is is possibly something which we would struggle with now with all of our machinery and everything. So to actually think how these ancient structures were built, maybe taking generations of people to build them, they wouldn't have been built in a day. It really opens our minds to the wonders of the universe and the wonders of the earth, I think.
Because I believe that the stone for Stonehenge was from South Wales.
Yeah.
So it had travelled already.
I know.
That shows communication links.
Yes.
They must have had some way of transporting that. There's also in Salisbury Museum some of the finds from Stonehenge, and there are artifacts there that show that there were links to much further afield. I think there's something from Egypt there, which then you start to think, ooh, did they kind of have ideas of how to build, because the Egyptians were doing their thing and they were doing, there was actually some crossover of information. How do we do this? So, and this we're talking thousands of years ago.
I know, I find it fascinating. I mean, there weren't satellites in the sky or computers or anything like that. They were very much reliant on trade routes for passing information along. And their use of geometry, and I think, deserves complete respect. And we sometimes think that people in the past perhaps were not as intelligent as we are, but I have to say that sometimes I think they were perhaps more so.
Yeah.
Because just ultimate respect.
Yeah. They did we can't work out how they did what they did. So in that way, they're ahead of us. Aren't they? Well, this has been lovely. Thank you so much for talking to me about this.
Yeah.
We've covered all sorts. That's been so fun. Thank you, Alison.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much, Philippa. I've loved it. Thank you.